The sun beat down on the dry desert, the air thick and hot, the kind of heat that seemed to swallow you whole. The land stretched endlessly, barren and empty, with only a few scattered cactus plants clinging to life. This was the world Elena had known for most of her life. The unforgiving desert of the American Southwest, a place where survival was never guaranteed, and death was always close by. Elena was just a girl, barely 16, but her life had already been marked by loss and violence. She was part of a small Apache raiding group, traveling through the desert, fighting for survival and protecting her people. Her tribe, like many others, had been pushed to the edge by settlers, soldiers, and time. But Elena was not just another soldier in a war she didn't fully understand. She was a daughter, a sister, and a young girl who had been forced to grow up too quickly. That day had started like any other. Elena and her group were on a mission, silent, swift, and deadly. The raid had been planned carefully, but something had gone terribly wrong. A sudden ambush by a group of U.S. soldiers had scattered them, and in the chaos, Elena had been separated from the others. She ran, her heart pounding in her chest, her legs weak from running for what felt like hours, but the soldiers were closing in. Elena had been shot once in her leg, the wound deep and painful, but she kept going. She had no choice. Her mind raced as she pushed through the pain. Her body was starting to give out, but she couldn't stop. Her people needed her, or at least she had to get away from the soldiers. She had no idea where she was going or where the others had ended up, but she couldn't afford to think about that now. The desert wasn't kind to the wounded. It didn't matter if you were a young girl or a seasoned warrior. If you couldn't keep up, you wouldn't survive. She fell to her knees at one point, blood oozing from the wound, but somehow she managed to pull herself back up. Her eyes blurred, her body shaking, and then everything went dark. When Elena opened her eyes again, she wasn't in the desert anymore. She was lying on a rough bed of hay, her leg wrapped tightly with a crude bandage. Her head ached, and every part of her body felt broken. Her arm was bruised and swollen, and her ribs felt like they had been crushed. She tried to move, but the pain was so intense that she gasped and cried out. Her breath came in short gasps as she tried to make sense of what was happening. The last thing she remembered was running, then falling. Had she died? Was this the afterlife? The room around her was dark, with only the faint glow of a fire in the corner casting shadows across the walls. There was a smell of cooked meat and smoke and the soft sound of wind outside. She turned her head trying to see more, but the pain was too much. Just then, a figure stepped into the dim light. It was a man, tall and rugged, wearing a worn cowboy hat and clothes that looked like they had seen better days. He had the look of someone who had lived a hard life, someone used to the harshness of the world. He paused at the entrance, his eyes narrowing as he saw her awake. "Hey," he said, his voice gruff, but there was something else in it, a quiet concern that didn't quite match the roughness of his appearance. Elena didn't answer. She couldn't. She was too weak to speak, too tired to make sense of anything, but she felt the weight of his gaze on her, the way he studied her every move, almost as if he were deciding what to do next. He took a step forward, and Elena instinctively pulled away, though she knew it was futile. She couldn't escape. She could barely move. The man's gaze softened as he crouched down beside her. "You're not dead," he muttered, more to himself than to her. He paused, his hand reaching toward her face, then hesitated. "Guess that's a good sign." Elena wanted to ask him where she was, who he was, but her voice was gone. She couldn't even find the strength to say the words. Instead, she closed her eyes, wishing for sleep to take her again. But sleep didn't come, not yet. The man didn't leave. Instead, he sat by her side, keeping watch. His presence was strange and unsettling. Elena knew that she should be scared of him. He was a cowboy, a settler, an enemy in her world. Yet, something about him made her feel a strange sense of safety. Maybe it was because he hadn't hurt her yet. Maybe it was because he hadn't shown any immediate intent to kill her, like so many of the soldiers had done before. In the hours that followed, Elena drifted in and out of consciousness. She woke to the man's face close to hers at one point, his eyes scanning her injuries. He made no move to touch her, but his stare was intense, as if he were looking for something in her. She had no idea what he saw. At some point, she became aware of a pain in her chest, a dull ache that was there even when she wasn't moving. Her ribs felt cracked, and the heaviness in her body seemed unbearable. She shifted slightly, trying to get comfortable, but that only made things worse. Finally, the man spoke again. "You need to rest. You're lucky I found you when I did. If I'd been any later..." He didn't finish the thought, but Elena could hear the unspoken words. He didn't need to say it. She knew what he meant. She opened her eyes slowly, her vision blurry. Her head was still swimming and she felt dizzy, but there was something else too. The pain in her body was too much to bear, and in that moment Elena found herself whispering through the pain, "Just kill me." Her voice was barely audible, a broken sound that barely escaped her lips. But the man heard it. He froze, his eyes wide with surprise. He didn't speak for a moment, and for a second Elena thought that maybe she had imagined it. But then, his hand moved slowly and she felt the heat of his fingers brushing against her skin as he lifted the blanket covering her. The moment felt suspended in time. Elena knew she was a prisoner now, that she was at his mercy. And for the first time she wondered if death would be easier than the pain she was feeling. The unbearable weight of her broken body, the guilt of losing her people, the fear of what the future held, all of it seemed to close in on her. She closed her eyes again, waiting for whatever came next. Would he kill her? Or would he leave her to suffer? The man stared at her for a long time, and Elena could almost feel the battle raging in his mind. She wasn't sure what was going through his head, but she could sense his hesitation. Then slowly he lowered the blanket, his face frozen in a mixture of shock and uncertainty. What he saw beneath the blanket was something that would haunt him for a long time. The man's hand trembled as he lowered the blanket, revealing the girl's broken body. Elena's once proud figure was now frail and shattered, her limbs twisted and bruised. Her skin was pale, almost ghostly, and the blood-stained bandages around her leg and chest told a story of pain and survival. It was clear that she had been through far more than any person should ever endure. Yet despite everything, there was a spark of life in her. Her eyes, though tired and full of anguish, still held a hint of defiance. She wasn't ready to give up, even if the world around her seemed to be falling apart. The cowboy, whose name was Nathaniel but who had always gone by Nate, took a step back, his mind racing. He wasn't a healer. He didn't know how to fix what was broken, physically or emotionally. He had spent most of his life out in the wilderness, living as a scout for the U.S. Army, trying to survive the chaos of the times. But seeing her like this, broken and vulnerable, something in him shifted.
He didn't know why he couldn't just walk away and leave her to her fate.
Something about her suffering, the sheer pain in her eyes, struck him deeper than any battle he had fought. Nate's instincts told him to stay away, to keep his distance, but his heart told him something different. As much as he hated the Apache, he hated the violence even more. He had seen so much of it, too much. He had been part of it. But here, with Elena's eyes locked on his, he realized that she was just a girl, no different than the children back home who had never known the horrors of war. She wasn't a warrior. She wasn't a threat. She was just a human being suffering like anyone else. He knelt beside her, carefully, cautiously, unsure of how to proceed. She was too weak to defend herself, too broken to fight back. Still, he spoke softly, not wanting to frighten her. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, though he wasn't sure if she could even hear him through her pain. "I'm just trying to help." But Elena didn't respond. She didn't move, didn't acknowledge his words. Instead, her eyes remained fixed on him, hollow, as if she was still holding on to some thread of life, some small part of herself that refused to be snuffed out by the harshness of the world. She had heard enough lies in her life to know that the world didn't always live up to its promises. Nate's hand hovered over her broken body, unsure of what to do. He had seen men shot and left to die in the desert, their wounds untreated, their cries unheard. He had seen women and children taken prisoner, only to be treated as less than human. He had been part of it all, part of the violence that had destroyed so many lives. But here in this small cabin with this broken girl lying in front of him, he realized that he couldn't be part of it anymore. He couldn't stand by and let her die. Not like this. Nate stood up slowly, his muscles aching from the tension in his body. He grabbed a small tin cup from a nearby table, filled it with water from a pot over the fire, and returned to Elena's side. He held the cup to her lips, gently coaxing her to drink. At first she resisted, but after a moment she allowed him to tilt the cup to her mouth. She drank greedily as if she hadn't had water in days. When she finished, Nate set the cup down and looked at her again, taking in the full extent of her injuries. Her bones were broken, her skin bruised, but she was still alive. He wasn't sure how long she would survive if he didn't do something, but he didn't know what he could do. He wasn't a doctor. He had no medical training. He couldn't even begin to imagine how to help her. But one thing was clear. Elena wasn't just going to let death take her quietly. Her body was beaten and battered, but her spirit was still strong. Even in her broken state, she had refused to give up. Nate could see it in the way she held on to consciousness, the way she fought through her pain. She wasn't going to die without a fight. Over the next few days, Nate did what he could to care for her. He changed the bandages on her wounds, making sure they stayed clean. He gave her water when she was thirsty, food when she could keep it down, and most importantly, he gave her something she hadn't had in a long time: kindness. He didn't know if it would be enough to save her, but he knew that he couldn't just stand by and watch her die. As the days passed, Elena's condition slowly improved. Her fever broke and she started to regain some strength. She didn't speak much, but Nate could tell that she was aware of everything around her. She would watch him with those quiet, intense eyes, and sometimes he thought he saw a flicker of gratitude there, but it was hard to tell. She had been through so much, and the scars of war ran deep. It was hard for her to trust anyone, especially a cowboy who had once been an enemy. One evening, as Nate sat by the fire cleaning his rifle, Elena surprised him by speaking. Her voice was weak, but it was the first time she had said anything since that moment when she had whispered, "Just kill me." "You're a soldier, aren't you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Nate paused, his hand stilling on the rifle. He wasn't sure how to answer. He had been a soldier once, yes, but it felt like a lifetime ago. He wasn't sure who he was anymore. "I was," he said quietly, "but I'm not anymore." Elena didn't say anything in response, but Nate could see the understanding in her eyes. She had heard enough of the world to know that people changed. But that didn't mean that she trusted him, not yet. She still saw him as a man of violence, a man who had taken lives without thinking twice. And maybe she was right. Maybe he had been that man. But now, sitting in that small cabin with her, tending to her wounds, Nate couldn't help but feel something shift inside him. He didn't know if it was guilt or redemption or just a sense of helplessness, but he knew one thing. He couldn't let her die. Not if there was anything he could do to stop it. The next morning, Elena's condition worsened again. Her breathing became shallow, and she began to shiver uncontrollably despite the warmth of the cabin. Nate's heart raced. He had to do something. He couldn't lose her now. He hurried to the nearby creek, filling his canteen with water. He boiled it over the fire, hoping the hot liquid would help her fight the infection that was taking hold of her body. When he returned, he found her delirious, muttering in her native tongue, her words barely understandable. She was in pain, too much pain for a young girl to endure. Her eyes were wide, feverish, and full of fear. She didn't recognize him at first, but as he approached, she focused on him. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "don't let me die like this." Nate knelt beside her, holding her hand gently. "I'm not going to let you die," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I swear it." It was a promise he wasn't sure he could keep, but he would do everything in his power to try. For the next few days, Nate fought beside Elena, refusing to give up. Every night he would sit by her side, keeping watch, hoping that she would make it through. And each day she grew a little stronger, her fever breaking, her breathing steadier. It was a slow process, but it was progress. Elena's body was healing, but her heart was still broken. The pain of losing her people, the violence that had shaped her life, all of it was still with her. But as she lay there, surrounded by the quiet desert, she began to understand something she hadn't before. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for peace even in the most broken places. And maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for her to start over.